So in my first video for this growth goal section, I had my students play a little four corners game where I put up a word problem and read it to them, and they had to choose which operation they thought they would have to use to solve the problem. We did this with decimal and fraction operations, and the kids loved it. They actually asked to play it quite often. So physical movement for this was a big thing, just getting them out of their seats. Sometimes they just get so over a lesson and so tired and just sitting in the same seat. So having them do this was a great way to get them moving around. I think that I did a pretty good job at explaining the directions and which corner was which operation. A lot of students will forget where to go if they think it's multiplication or division, whatever the operation is. So having to remind them after every question, hey, if you want addition, you have to go to this corner, or whatever it may be. They really enjoy the activity, and we have played it a few times since. I think that they followed the rules pretty well, and they just genuinely were interested in playing it, which was really cool. So normally having them explain or figure out which operation to use can be a little bit daunting for them, but having them collaborate with each other and discuss their thoughts was really cool to see, because some kids would say oh, I think it's this operation because of this reason, and then others were well, no, it says this, and they would change another student's mind. So that was awesome to see. Or if a student thought it was division and then they're oh wait, no, it's definitely multiplication, and then left the division corner when division was actually the correct answer, I'd be oh, you had it right. And they'd be oh, dang it, I wish I stayed in that corner, I had it right at first. So it was just a fun activity to get them moving around and really thinking about how they would solve the problem. It also allowed them to kind of put themselves in the position of the word problem, act it out a little bit, and see what was actually going on, not just thinking about it as a word problem, but if this was me in this situation, what would I do? How would I handle it? And that will help them solve the problem. One thing I also like to do with them is, especially with decimal and fraction word problems, if it's confusing as a decimal number, change it to a whole number. And for some of my students, that's still been a really, really, really hard thing to remember to do, or to concept to grasp. But for a lot of them, they just do it on their own now without me saying it. And it's so awesome to see, because they'll be so confused. And then they're wait, let me change it to whole numbers. They'll change it to whole numbers. And then they're oh, I know what to do. It's easy. So just that tiny little switch in their brain to, hey, let me just pause for a second, change it up a little bit, and see if I can kind of make this easier for myself, has really helped a lot. Having them explain their thinking and explain why they chose the operation was also great, because a lot of the times kids are just oh, I think it's this, I'm sticking with this, and don't actually put the thought behind it. So making them explain and reflect on why was a great idea, and I'm really glad that I picked someone from every corner to choose why, so they could hear other people's perspectives, because at times that would change kids' minds too, and they'd be wait, I'm going over there with them. I feel I also used a pretty good pace and was pretty enthusiastic about it, and celebrated their successes when necessary. And I also just implementing a game. It's quick and easy. We normally do this for 10 minutes or so, and it's really easy to implement those small little games to get them more engaged in the lesson. Another thing I loved about this game was it allowed students to teach other students. So I had a few instances where I could think of this one specifically, where one of my students was the only kid that chose subtraction or something. And then I had another student say, well, they each explained their points of view as to why. And then the student that was correct was wait, Marvin, this is what you have to be doing. And kind of explained the whole thing. It was this is what the person's saying, this is what the problem's asking for. We know to do this because this, And it was just great to watch them. I just love watching when they can teach someone else what to do. It's awesome because I always say to them, like, if you can explain it to me or teach it to another student, you have mastered what I'm trying to teach you, and that's all I ask for. That's amazing. That's all I want. So that was just another addition to why that was a great activity. In my second video, I had the students play a game called Boss and Banker, so another game that I implemented there. And basically what they do is there's one person that's the boss, one person that is the banker, and they need to figure out how much money they're going to pay their employees. So what I will normally do is give them some amount, and that's the amount of money that the boss is allotted to pay their employees. And they have to then figure out, well, if I have 4 employees, how much money is each employee going to get? If I have 2 employees, how much money would they get? This helps them with long division, and just having that hands-on money to work with, it helps them so much. They ask to play this all the time as well, or even just like using it with decimals and not division, just adding or subtracting. But the boss will then have to ask the banker for change. So not only do they have to figure out how much money are they going to have to give to each of their employees, but they also have to know about money. Hey, if I only have a 20, what am I going to say to the banker? So I always make them say, hey, banker, can I exchange my $20 bill for 21s or whatever the money may be that they need? But they have to say it in the correct way. If they just hand them the $20 bill, then I think they don't know what they're asking for and what they need, and they are just relying on the banker. So they have to really be intentional with what they're asking. It allowed students to move into different groups, and I got to organize them based off of their skill level and who I thought would work well together. Every time we did this, I tried to switch up the groups a little bit, so they weren't always with the same students, and they got to help each other out a lot, which was really cool. This game also involved a lot of acting out things, so some of them would really get into it and act like a real boss or act like a real banker, and they just had fun with it, which was nice. And I feel like I did a really good, I feel like in general, I do a pretty good job at celebrating my students and saying great job or excellent work, things like that to them all the time. I feel like positive feedback is just so important in these kids' lives, especially if they don't get it at home. So just saying like, you're doing awesome, even if maybe they weren't doing awesome before, or maybe they're struggling still. Giving that positive feedback will always help them. With this money activity also, it's super easy to ask them and probe for correct answers here. So the main boy that I was talking to in the money video, he's a struggler sometimes, and he gets off task normally when he doesn't understand something, and he'll try to be the class clown. So working with him and just kind of trying to pull those answers out of him, it was cool to watch back and be like, oh, okay, I was asking him this question so that he would give me this answer. It's sometimes when I'm watch back what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, some of these things I was very intentional on, and some of them I may not have been, but it's awesome to see that it just kind of came out. And then also just following classroom rules. In the first video, I feel like they were doing it really well, following their classroom rules. And in this Money Banker Boss video, I think the group I was with was, but sometimes if I'm with one group or helping one student, some other students may get off task. So me using my hand as a nonverbal cue and asking them to just quiet down a little bit, just kind of reminded them, hey, we are in a classroom, we need to follow the same rules, can't be screaming too loud, can't be clapping too loud, things like that. But some things that I feel like I should work on, and just in both videos, honestly, is noticing and reacting when students aren't focused or aren't engaged, aren't paying attention, or aren't participating. A lot of the times someone will just shout out an answer kind of quickly, or they'll get it quicker than others and they won't. Then the other student, maybe I don't know if they completely are understanding what's going on. So just keeping the students all engaged and trying to ask every single student a question or what they know, things like that, I think will help a lot more. And I feel like that's something I need to work on in general. But like, especially in the Four Corners video, you could see at times a few of them may have been just chit-chatting about other things. But in my mind, for the most part, or from what I could see or what I was realizing at the time, I thought everyone was on task and paying attention. So that's something that I want to focus on more, is making sure, being intentional on looking at every single student and making sure that they are all on task and focused and participating in the group activity, the class activity, or whatever it may be.